They saw a lonely woman at the bar and thought she was an easy target for their arrogance. They didn't see the scars, the shadowed eyes, or the trident hidden in her pocket. They thought they were the predators. They didn't realize they had just cornered the deadliest thing in the room. The air inside the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar just a few miles off the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, smelled of stale beer, floor wax, and testosterone. It was a Friday night, and the place was packed with fresh faces, young men with high and tight haircuts and egos that hadn't yet been bruised by the reality of war. In the back corner, sitting alone at a scratched wooden table, sat Harper Vance. To the casual observer, Harper didn't look like much. She was small-framed, wearing a battered leather jacket over a grey hoodie, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She nursed a glass of whiskey, her eyes fixed on the amber liquid, as if reading a map in its reflection. She looked tired. Not the sleepy kind of tired, but the soul-deep exhaustion that comes from 3 consecutive deployments in regions that didn't technically exist on public maps. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was just looking for quiet. But in a military town on a payday weekend, quiet was the rarest commodity of all. Near the jukebox, a group of 4 young men were making a scene. They were loud, boisterous, and wearing their fresh fatigues like costumes. They were recruits, likely washing out of BUDES, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, or fresh support staff who liked to pretend they were operators. "I'm telling you, bro, the instructors can't handle me," one of them shouted, slamming a pitcher onto a high-top table. This was Private Miller. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of face that had never been punched. "Instructor Goggins, please," I'd run circles around him. His friends, Jensen, Kowalski, and Carter, laughed, though it was a nervous, sycophantic sound. They were a pack, and Miller was the alpha dog by virtue of volume alone. Harper shifted in her seat, turning her back to them. She just wanted to finish her drink and go back to her empty apartment. But predators, even incompetent ones, sense weakness, or what they mistake for weakness. "Hey, check it out," Carter whispered, nudging Miller. He pointed toward the dark corner. "Solo target, 6 o'clock. Miller turned, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Harper. A smirk curled his lip. He adjusted his belt, puffed out his chest, and picked up his beer. "Watch and learn, boys. Let's go see if she needs a real man to keep her company." The 4 of them moved across the bar. It was a clumsy formation. They lacked the fluid grace of actual operators. They moved with the heavy-footed arrogance of boys playing soldier. Harper heard them coming. She didn't need to turn around. She could hear the distinct scuff of standard-issue boots and the change in acoustic pressure as they crowded her personal space. She took a slow sip of her whiskey, hoping they would keep walking. They didn't. "Little late for a girl to be out all by herself, isn't it?" Miller's voice boomed from directly behind her right shoulder. Harper didn't turn. "I'm fine. Thanks." Miller chuckled, looking back at his friends. They snickered, emboldened by his confidence. He stepped closer, placing a heavy hand on the back of her chair, leaning in so the smell of cheap domestic beer washed over her. "Come on now, don't be rude," Miller said, his voice dropping to a patronizing drawl. "We're just being gentlemen. You know who we are? We're the guys who keep you safe at night. We're the elite." Harper finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, dark flint. "Is that right?" "Damn straight," Kowalski chimed in, moving to block her exit on the left. "Navy's finest. You should show a little respect." Harper looked at the 4 of them. She catalogued them instantly. Miller. Left knee favors a slight limp, probably a stress fracture he's hiding. Jensen. Nervous, eyes darting, likely follows orders blindly. Kowalski. Aggressive, hands in fists, insecure. Carter. the follower. "I respect the Navy," Harper said softly, her voice raspy. "I just don't respect bad manners. Please leave me alone." Miller's smile vanished. Rejection wasn't part of the script. "We aren't leaving until you have a drink with us. You think you're too good for us? You look like you've had a rough night, maybe a rough life. We're trying to do you a favor." "I'm asking you once," Harper said, her hand resting flat on the table. "Walk away." "Or what?" Miller sneered, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. The bar had gone quiet nearby. People were watching. "You gonna cry? You gonna call your boyfriend?" "No," Harper said, her thumb tracing the rim of her glass. "I'm going to give you 45 seconds to save your careers." Laughter erupted from the group. It was sharp, mocking laughter that bounced off the low ceiling of the bar. "Did you hear that?" Miller shouted to the room at large. "She's giving us 45 seconds. Or what, sweetheart? You gonna hit me with your purse?" Jensen and Carter were practically doubled over. "Man, she's feisty. I like 'em feisty," Jensen said, wiping a tear from his eye. But Kowalski didn't laugh. He was staring at Harper's hand on the table. It wasn't shaking. It was perfectly still. And there was something about the knuckles, scarred, callous, slightly swollen, that triggered a primitive warning bell in his brain. But he ignored it. Peer pressure was a powerful drug. "You don't know who you're talking to," Miller said, his voice hardening. The playful veneer was gone. Now it was just bullying. "We own this town. You're just a civilian, a nobody. You should be thanking us for even looking at you." Harper sighed. It was a sound of immense disappointment. She had hoped to avoid this. She had just returned from a 6-month rotation in the Horn of Africa. She had seen things these boys couldn't imagine in their worst nightmares. She had lost friends. She had taken lives. The adrenaline of combat had burned out weeks ago, leaving only a cold ash in her chest. "You're not SEALs," Harper stated. It wasn't a question. Miller bristled. "We are trainees at the center. We're basically there." "Basically," Harper repeated dryly. "So, you're nobody. You're wet behind the ears. You haven't passed Hell Week, and you're out here harassing a woman in a bar because it makes you feel big. Watch your mouth!" Miller slammed his hand on the table, making her glass jump. "You have no idea what we go through. The sacrifice." Sacrifice. Harper stood up. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'6", but the way she stood made the air in the corner of the room feel suddenly heavy. She didn't slouch. She didn't retreat. She stood with a balanced, predatory stillness. Sacrifice is watching your best friend bleed out in a helicopter over a desert you can't pronounce, Harper said, her voice low but cutting through the noise like a razor wire. Sacrifice is missing your mother's funeral because you were in a hide site for 3 weeks eating paste. Sacrifice is not getting drunk on a Friday and intimidating women. Miller blinked, taken aback by the specificity of her words. But his ego wouldn't let him back down. He felt the eyes of the bar on him. He had to win. "You talk a big game," Miller spat. "You read that in a book? Or did you bang some operator and think that makes you one of us?" The insult hung in the air, toxic and ugly. Harper looked at her watch. 30 seconds left. "I'm not going anywhere," Miller growled. He stepped closer, invading her space completely. The other 3 moved in tighter, forming a wall of fatigues around her. They were surrounding her, cutting off her vision of the exit. It was a classic intimidation tactic. "You're making a mistake," Harper said. Her heart rate hadn't even elevated. Her training had kicked in. Condition red. She was assessing threats. Miller is the striker. Kowalski is the grappler. The other 2 are noise. "The only mistake," Miller said, reaching out to grab her arm. "Is you thinking you can disrespect me?" Harper moved. It was a subtle shift, a dropping of her weight, preparing to dislocate Miller's elbow if his hand made contact. But before skin touched skin, the front door of the Rusty Anchor swung open with a force that rattled the hinges. The wind from the harbor blew in, but it wasn't the wind that silenced the room. It was the silhouette standing in the doorway. A massive figure, backlit by the streetlights. He stepped inside, and the dim light revealed the uniform. It wasn't the sloppy fatigues of a trainee. It was the pristine, tailored dress blues of a Master Chief petty officer. And on his chest, a rack of ribbons that looked like a spilled box of crayons, topped with the gold trident that shone like a star. It was Master Chief Bull O'Malley, a living legend in Coronado, the kind of man who ate glass for breakfast and had trained half the active duty teams. The bar went deathly silent. Even the music seemed to fade. Miller, his hand inches from Harper's arm, froze. He recognized the face. Every recruit knew that face. It was the face of God in their world. 10 seconds, Harper whispered to Miller. Master Chief O'Malley scanned the room. His eyes were like lasers, cutting through the smoke and the crowd. He wasn't looking for a drink. He was looking for someone. His gaze swept over the bar and locked onto the corner. He saw the 4 recruits. He saw the aggressive posture. He saw the woman surrounded in the middle. O'Malley's face, usually made of granite, darkened into a thunderstorm. He began to walk across the room. His steps were heavy, rhythmic, and terrifying. Thud, thud, thud. Miller was sweating now. He pulled his hand back from Harper as if he had touched a hot stove. "Master Chief," Miller stammered, snapping to a sloppy position of attention. "We were just—" Jensen, Kowalski, and Carter scrambled to align themselves, their faces draining of color. They looked like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. "At ease, recruits." O'Malley didn't even bark it. He growled it. He stopped 3 feet from them, towering over Miller. "What is going on here?" Miller swallowed hard. "Sir." "Chief." We were just maintaining order. This civilian, she was being belligerent, disrespecting the Navy. We were just explaining the core values to her. Miller thought he was clever. He thought he could spin it. He assumed the Master Chief would side with the men in uniform against a scruffy woman in a bar. O'Malley looked at Miller with an expression of pure disgust. Then he looked past Miller, directly at Harper. Harper hadn't moved. She was leaning against the table, her arms crossed, looking bored. "Belligerent?" O'Malley repeated. "Yes, Chief," Miller said, gaining a tiny bit of confidence. She was running her mouth about operations, stolen valor type stuff. We were shutting it down. O'Malley stared at Miller for a long, agonizing second. "You were shutting it down?" "Yes, Chief." "You 4? O'Malley pointed a finger like a knife. "Surrounded a lone woman in a bar." "She was asking for it, Chief," Kowalski muttered, then instantly regretted it as O'Malley's eyes snapped to him. "You boys have a lot to learn about threat assessment," O'Malley said softly, "because from where I'm standing, you aren't the ones in charge here." Miller looked confused. "Chief?" O'Malley ignored him. He stepped forward, pushing Miller aside as if he were a curtain. He walked right up to Harper. The recruits held their breath, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the Master Chief to tear this civilian apart for disrespecting his recruits. O'Malley stopped in front of Harper. He looked her up and down, taking in the tired eyes, the leather jacket, the stillness. Then, to the absolute shock of everyone in the Rusty Anchor, Master Chief O'Malley snapped his heels together. The sound was like a pistol shot. He raised his right hand in a crisp, razor-sharp salute. "Lieutenant Commander," O'Malley barked, his voice ringing with absolute respect. The silence in the bar was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Miller's jaw literally fell open. He looked at Harper, then at the chief, then back at Harper. Harper slowly pushed off the table. She didn't return the salute immediately. She let it hang there, letting the weight of the moment crush the 4 boys standing around her. "At ease, Master Chief," Harper said quietly. O'Malley dropped his hand, but his posture remained rigid. "I was told you touched down an hour ago, ma'am. Admiral Sterling sent me to pick you up. He didn't want you taking a cab." "I needed a drink first, Bull," Harper said, a small, tired smile touching her lips. "But apparently, the local nursery school is on a field trip." She gestured casually to the 4 recruits. Miller looked like he was going to vomit. "Lieutenant Commander." She was an officer, and not just an officer. O'Malley, the god of war, had saluted her. "Did these recruits bother you, ma'am?" O'Malley asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Harper looked at Miller. The arrogance was gone. The bravado was dead. All that was left was fear. "They were just educating me on sacrifice, Master Chief," Harper said coolly. "Private Miller here was telling me how he runs circles around Instructor Goggins." O'Malley slowly turned his head to look at Miller. The look on his face promised a pain that would last for years. The heavy oak door of the Rusty Anchor slammed shut, severing the warmth of the bar from the biting chill of the Coronado night. For Miller, Jensen, Kowalski, and Carter, the silence of the street was more terrifying than the noise inside. Miller stood on the cracked pavement, his chest heaving. It wasn't from exertion. It was from a panic so pure and icy, it felt like he had swallowed liquid nitrogen. The alcohol in his system had evaporated in a single heartbeat, replaced by the sickening clarity of what he had just done. "Miller!" Jensen's voice was a broken whisper. He looked like a child who had lost his parents in a crowd. She was... "Shut up!" Miller hissed, though there was no venom in it, only dread. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling violently. Minutes ago, he had felt like a king, a predator circling prey. Now, he felt like a distinct stain on the pavement. He had laid hands on a superior officer. He had threatened a decorated Navy SEAL. He had mocked a woman who had likely forgotten more about warfare than he would ever learn. The black trident, the matte black insignia of the Special Operations night teams, flashed in his mind like a strobe light. 3 miles, Kowalski muttered, staring down the dark stretch of highway toward the amphibious base. The bartender said 3 miles. "Move," Miller choked out. He started to jog, his boots slapping heavily against the asphalt. "What?" Carter asked, frozen in place. "Run!" Miller screamed, his voice cracking. "If O'Malley gets there before us, if we aren't in the surf when he parks that car, we're dead. We're worse than dead. We're erased." The fear was contagious. The 4 recruits took off, their dress shoes and boots ill-suited for a forced march on concrete. They ran past the tourist shops, past the closed cafes, their breath pluming in the cold air. Miller's left knee, the one with the stress fracture he had been hiding from the medical officers, began to scream in protest. A sharp, hot needle of pain drove into his bone with every step. Good, he thought grimly. Let it hurt. It was nothing compared to the phantom pain of his career dissolving in real time. As they ran, the pack dynamic that had emboldened them in the bar disintegrated. They weren't a unit anymore. They were 4 terrified boys running from the consequences of their own arrogance. Carter was wheezing, falling behind. Kowalski was cursing under his breath, a stream of profanity directed entirely at himself. Meanwhile, a mile ahead in the comfort of a black government SUV, The atmosphere was quiet, almost church-like. Master Chief Bull O'Malley drove with the casual precision of a man who could navigate a minefield blindfolded. The dashboard lights cast a green glow on his craggy face. He glanced in the rearview mirror, checking on his passenger, then looked back at the road. "You went easy on them, ma'am," O'Malley said, his deep voice breaking the silence. Harper Vance sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the ocean churning in the darkness to her right. She had removed the leather jacket, revealing the tactical watch on her wrist and the faint, jagged scar running down her forearm, a souvenir from a rooftop in Yemen. "Easy," Harper replied, her voice distant. "I didn't break their arms, Bull. I broke their egos. Bones heal in 6 weeks. Egos take a lifetime." O'Malley chuckled, a dry sound like gravel crunching. "True. But Miller, that kid has been walking around the training center like he owns the pavement. Needs a reset. Just didn't think he'd be stupid enough to try and pick up a Tier 1 operator." "They see what they want to see," Harper said softly. She rubbed her eyes, the exhaustion of the last 6 months finally crashing down on her. They saw a woman alone. They saw a target. They didn't see the predator because they've never actually met one. She turned to look at the Master Chief. "Do you think they'll make it?" "To the base?" O'Malley checked the digital clock on the dash. "If they sprint, if they want it bad enough." "Good," Harper whispered. "Let them run. Let them feel the cold. Maybe it'll save their lives one day. Better they learn fear from me in a bar than from an insurgent in a cave." The SUV slowed as they approached the guarded gates of the Naval Amphibious Base. The sentries snapped to attention as they recognized O'Malley's vehicle. The gate arm lifted. O'Malley drove through, but instead of heading to the officers' quarters, he turned the wheel sharply, guiding the heavy vehicle toward the beach, toward the grinder, the legendary asphalt slab where SEAL dreams went to die. He parked the car facing the ocean. He killed the engine. He rolled down the window and waited. 5 minutes later, the sound of ragged, desperate breathing drifted over the dunes. Miller came into view first. He was limping badly, his face a mask of red agony, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the cold. Jensen and Kowalski were right behind him, supporting Carter, who looked ready to collapse. They stumbled onto the sand, their legs giving out. They fell to their knees, gasping, coughing, their lungs burning as if they had inhaled fire. They looked up. The black SUV was there, waiting. The door opened. O'Malley stepped out. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply stood there, arms crossed, silhouetted against the moonlight. Miller dragged himself to his feet. He forced his body into a position of attention, though he swayed like a drunkard. The others followed suit, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Harper stepped out of the passenger side. She walked slowly across the sand until she stood 5 feet from Miller. She looked fresh, calm, and terrifyingly composed. "Check your watch, Private," Harper said. Miller fumbled for his wrist, his eyes blurry with sweat. 0604, ma'am." "You made it with 60 seconds to spare," she said. Miller let out a sob of relief. "Ma'am, "Save your breath," Harper cut him off. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper that the wind carried to all 4 of them. "You made it to the starting line, that's all. Tonight was the easy part. Tonight, you ran because you were scared of me." She pointed to the dark, freezing ocean crashing against the shore behind them. "Tomorrow, and every day after that, you run because you want to be worthy of the trident you tried to disrespect. Do you understand me?" "Hoo-yah, ma'am!" all 4 screamed, the sound raw and desperate. "Get in the water!" O'Malley barked from behind her. "Link arms! Surf torture, until I get tired of watching you." As the 4 recruits scrambled into the freezing Pacific surf, fully clothed, Harper turned back to the SUV. She watched them shiver as the first wave hit them, locking their arms together to stay upright against the tide. They might make it after all, O'Malley mused, watching the boys struggle. Maybe, Harper said, opening the car door. But they'll never look at a woman in a bar the same way again. She climbed into the car, the drama finished, leaving the boys in the cold water to wash away the arrogance of youth, layer by painful layer. That is the story of how arrogance met reality in the form of Lieutenant Commander Harper Vance. It's a reminder that true power doesn't need to be loud, and you never truly know who you are standing next to. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and military justice, please hit the like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories every week. See you in the next one.